Ever since China rolled out its 9-line, now known as the 10-line, oh my god, the South China Sea never experienced silence anymore. The presence of China's People's Liberation Army Navy and Chinese maritime militia vessels alone proved that these high waters are no longer safe. In fact, they are more perilous than before. On October 22, 2023, a Chinese Coast Guard vessel appeared to purposely collide with a Philippine resupply boat named Unaiza. This blocking maneuver by China occurred at about 10 nautical miles from the Ayungin Shoal, or Second Thomas Shoal, which, by the way, is within the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. The resupply mission was crucial for the stationed Filipino soldiers in the atoll, but China apparently disrupted it. But how does China is doing these maneuvers? Because, as far as I am concerned, their recent occupations and infractions against other maritime powers are already illegal and/or in violation of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. I am no expert on naval laws, but what China is doing is daylight robbery. But let me ask this question once more. How is China doing these aggressive maritime maneuvers? Let's do this deep dive. One thing that we need to establish is that China is trying to take sovereign control of the global oceans. As much as I want to be moderate about this statement, I can't downplay the fact that it is trying to expand its maritime territory outside what is permitted by applicable international laws. Over the years, the historical narrative of China anchors its ownership of the South China Sea, based on the argument that it is the country's traditional fishing grounds. Normally, this argument is acceptable, but not under the terms of international laws, as it is clearly indicated in the UNCLOS that no country can claim sovereignty over the living marine resources of any high seas. What a country can own are the resources within its exclusive economic zone. The maritime laws have been governed for decades by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, so most rules appear quite clear. Nations possess territorial seas extending 12 nautical miles from their coastlines, as do islands. However, rocks and submerged features do not enjoy this privilege. Moreover, countries are granted resource zones extending at least 200 nautical miles, exclusively designated for fishing, mining, and harvesting deep-sea resources. All states are entitled to navigate, sail, and operate in waters beyond territorial seas and pass unobstructed through straits. The issue at hand is that, despite being a signatory to the UN Convention, China openly disregards each of these fundamental principles. So right from the start, what China is doing is illegal. In fact, it has been declared unlawful by the United Nations. But Beijing, making its classic Beijing moves, slammed this ruling by the UN, stating that it is illegal and baseless. I don't know about you, but China is posturing itself as a greater entity than the collective union of several countries. Perhaps Beijing is recklessly doing these stunts because it can back its claim. I mean, China arguably has the biggest military and naval force in the world right now. So when it wants something, it can easily exert its hard power. China clearly wants one thing, and that is the sovereignty of the high seas. I might sound exaggerating, but based on their recent actions and activities in the recent years, the country is forcibly expressing its interest in owning the South China Sea. Keep in mind that this tug-of-war between China and multiple Southeast Asian countries has been going on for 10 years. It is entirely possible that China believes that, in time, its presence in the South China Sea will make other countries acknowledge its presence in those highly contested waters. So, in short, China is seizing the world's oceans via adverse possession. But what is adverse possession in the first place? Well, the concept or doctrine of adverse possession supposedly doesn't apply in maritime law. As far as I know, that should have been the case. Adverse possession is technically an Anglo-American property law, which is also referred to as squatters' rights. What this doctrine implies is that an individual or entity gains legal or legitimate ownership of a real property by simply occupying that property for a certain period of time, even if this occupation doesn't have any permission from the actual owner. Are you seeing the correlation now? There are variations of this doctrine in different jurisdictions, but the key elements stay the same. In a nutshell, As long an entity engages in actual, open, notorious, and visible, exclusive, hostile, and continuous possession of a property, the state or jurisdiction could give them an opportunity for legal rights and ownership. Then again, we are talking about maritime laws here. However, due to some trickery only known to them, the People's Republic of China is somewhat applying the adverse possession doctrine as an effective, long-term global naval strategy. I mean, it is giving them leverage right now, so it is definitely working. By its actual, open, notorious, and visible, exclusive, hostile, and continuous possession of the South China Sea, China is slowly working its way to acquire the rights over the water's maritime resources and territories. It is a passive-aggressive approach, especially whenever there are incidents between China and other countries' naval or fishing vessels. China simply states that if you engage in any activities in the highly contested waters, you are triggering unnecessary tension. That's a bold statement from a country that doesn't have any legal proof of ownership. The mere fact that China already trespasses on its other nation's EEZ further adds insult to injury. The idea of adapting a real estate doctrine into a real-time maritime strategy might seem ridiculous. But don't get me wrong, this method could potentially succeed. After all, China, as a state, has become a mastermind in the craft of utilizing baseless and empty legal arguments to oppress states into situations that would have required military action if brought into a more traditional context. In this scenario, the distant water fishing fleet's presence takes on a pivotal role, potentially shaping China's strategic assertion of sovereignty over global oceans. The People's Liberation Army Navy, complemented by the Maritime Militia and other entities, seems ready to support these claims, especially in regions where China has previously wielded influence over key decision-makers. I don't know about you, but these ridiculous actions of China necessitate a resolute and unambiguous response from other foreign powers. As our planet, with 70% of its surface covered by water, becomes a stage for claims and interests in global commons, it raises legitimate concerns. The newly proposed High Seas Treaty appears to be a step in this direction, but if we consider China's actions in the exclusive economic zones of coastal states, such as Indonesia and the Philippines, it's evident that the treaty may not deter its ambitions. In property law, addressing adverse possession involves recognizing the occupant and making a choice to either permit their presence or remove them. All nations must collectively illuminate China's strategy and diminish the arguments it presents for potential rights and interests on the high seas. In the insightful work, China's Law of the Sea, The New Rules of Maritime Order, China analyst Isaac B. Carden posits a striking perspective. Beijing, he argues, views itself as transcending the boundaries of international law and evading accountability, particularly with smaller states. While the global transformation of the maritime order remains elusive for China, its actions reverberate far beyond its immediate waters. Carden contends that in East Asia, China isn't so much rewriting the rules as diminishing their significance. In this region, it's China's word that prevails, often employing a veto jurisdiction to impede the development of oil and gas resources by countries like Japan, Vietnam, and the Philippines, unless they conform to Beijing's terms. When confronted with unwanted litigation, China invokes a great power exception and champions a sovereignty norm to evade the South China Sea arbitration initiated by the Philippines. China's maritime policies are influencing a shift in the international order, undermining the relevance of established rules. However, China's unique position lies in its robust naval, law enforcement, and maritime militia fleets. Now, these questions arise. How will this dynamic impact less powerful states? Will they now assert expansive historic rights claims? Will parties to the UN Convention feel justified in disregarding convention-required arbitration? Will other nations find it acceptable to exclude their neighbors from enjoying resource rights? There's one clear thing right now. By China's continuous rejection to international tribunals and the inaction of the United States to enforce these rulings, the small regional states within China's 9- or 10- line argument will be left with little to no option to fight back. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, Please subscribe to Beyond Life. I know doing these things is a chore, but with those little clicks, you can help our channel grow and allow us to produce more value-oriented content just like this. Allow us to earn your every subscription. That's it for now. Stay safe and see you in the next one.